especially here in America, the combative nature of this one versus that one. It almost like they had two Van Halens for one. They had David Lee Roth with Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan and Greg Bissonette out there playing Van Halen songs, doing big rock shows, and then they had Van Halen with Sammy Hagar. And it was like two Van Halens, two different versions of Van Halen in a way. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's a really interesting sort of take on it. In my head, I think Dave was ready to jump, no pun intended.
Right.
But, obviously he's at an absolute peak of his powers. He is the man at this point. Everybody knows who he is. Everything he's touching is turning to gold. His ego's stoked to a huge degree, but he's also imbibing a huge amount of ego powder, let's call it, at the time. And, if ever there's a time where you're like, man, I don't need those schmucks, that's surely got to be it. Like night after night, you're doing your thing. And, one thing that Alton Confer mentioned, on that tour, is like, we're talking about how Eddie's solos were getting longer and longer as part of the show at the time. And, you can imagine, Dave sort of kicking up his heels on the side of the stage, so jeez, night after night, think, why am I waiting for this? What is this? Why don't I can have 4 other songs in there.
Not only that, Paul, not just Eddie's solo, Alex had an extended solo. Michael Anthony had an extended solo. I mean, if you look at the set list, a good chunk of it, Dave wasn't on the stage.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, that's probably fun for a while you're getting up to what you're doing backstage. But night after night, you've got to be thinking, man, all this fat on this show, like, do we really need this? Like, someone who understands, instinctively and intuitively the sort of power of showbiz, and that sort of boom, boom, boom aesthetic of just rocking people back on their heels every time and, serving up another, killer moment every 3 or 4 minutes. And then to have these segments sort of dragging down the show with, offering people the beer break or, the toilet break or whatever. You've got to be thinking, I could take what I'm doing and I could tighten this up a hell of a lot and all eyes on me. I think that all eyes on me thing is as important as anything because, here's a man who lives for the spotlight and is being shunted to the side for, 20 minutes a night while this goes on. And, sooner or later you got to think, man, do we need this? Look over here. This is when the show is happening, But I say it's interesting. And, if Warner's, as that theory goes, if Warner's had decided they were going to throw their weight behind Dave as the sort of most likely candidate to sort of survive this break, to thrive post-breakup, there's no need to abandon the other guys. So if you can get a makeshift artist in there to sort of make up the weight for a time, getting Savvy in, obviously someone hugely successful, proven track record, it's not going to stiff. You're going to get a certain amount, even if it doesn't capture the imagination in the same way as the classic lineup. It's still going to be a solid proposition out there. Two sold-out arenas in every city.
Well, Warner Brothers had already done it with Black Sabbath. They brought Dio in, and they had shepherded that whole situation, and Dio was successful for a while with Black Sabbath. So perhaps they were thinking along those lines. The other thing is Ted's book that Greg helped him write. This is nothing against Greg. We love Greg. He's a friend, and he did a great job. But I almost feel like he set a little bit of narrative there because I feel like there's missing holes in some of these stories. Like when he talked about, just kind of not being aware of situations going on in the band. How could he not be aware? He's not only their producer, but he was an executive at Warner Brothers. He had to be aware as to what was going on. And, things like that seemed very odd to me. Another thing that seemed odd is Eddie asking Patti Smythe repeatedly to take on as the lead singer of Van Halen. I mean, nothing against Patti. I think she's a fantastic singer. And could Eddie have written songs with her and done a solo album with her? Oh, I think he would have done a great job with that. But, I mean, it just doesn't fit the aesthetic of a hard rock band. She has a good rock voice, but not exactly Van Halen style. So what was he thinking with that?
Yeah, I mean, well, the only thing I sort of think about it was an element of, like, screw you, from Eddie. I mean, through Eddie's entire sort of history from the minute he started learning an instrument from piano, there was always an element of screw you, I'm not going to play by your rules. From refusing to read music properly to that means it's the course he took in Pasadena with the professor who said that, learn the rules so that there are no rules, so you can therefore ignore them. And there's always that brilliantly stubborn streak in Eddie, which is one of the things that I think is very admirable about his character, is that he constantly refused to take the most obvious route somewhere. And there may have been an element, maybe of that he, if he did see it coming, or if he sort of had a hint of maybe what was in store as well, if he maybe whispers were going around that, well, we can find a guy for you, that, this was another sort of attempt for Eddie to show his independence. They had a great friendship with Patty Spive, that the timing was sort of impossible for her, which was forcing her hand. Maybe there was something Eddie is like, I'm just going to take a complete 180 here on you, on what you want and what you're expecting and what everybody's expecting, and I'll do this my way. And again, I'd rather feel by my own hands than sort of succeed by whatever your little plot is for me.
Right, yeah. Well, you had mentioned in the book that Warner Brothers was pushing him to do a solo album after 1984. Do you think they were trying to stall him from moving on with Van Halen without Dave?
I mean, I would say undoubtedly, yes.
Yeah.
It's like again, it's, trying to distract him. With Dave, there was the element of like, well, we'll see how this goes. It sort of rocketed off at the start. But I think it'd be fair to say it sort of lost a little momentum fairly quickly. I mean, the Skyscraper album was still a great album, Just Like Paradise was a great single, but it seemed like things had already slowed down. Intimate Smile was nowhere near 10 million records. It was nowhere near 5 million records. While you could get all the attention, to get all the videos, to get all the airplay, ultimately, they wasn't shifting records anywhere near the same quantities as Van Halen were, or certainly Van Halen would have been expected to do post-1984. I think it was definitely if we can sort of shunt Eddie back into the studio for 6 months to 9 months, that buys us time to see how things develop, see if, sort of heads cool, to see if sort of cold hard logic starts to come in. So, and also, I guess they would have been able to sort of make quite a persuasive argument about that thing. Like, Eddie, you've always wanted to do your own thing. Here's your opportunity. We'll give you the money. We'll back you. Well, we're not going to interfere. You be you. You've got a year to do this. Even though you can imagine that would have appealed to Eddie. Again, it's that sort of antenna pricking up going, okay, now you want me to do this.
Right.
Now you want me to do something that all down the line you've been sort of steering me away from. So I think there is that sort of element of like a maverick kind of mischievous spirit of like, whatever you want me to do is exactly what I'm not going to do.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, though, I find the risk of 5150 was tremendous. It was very, very far away from 1984, yet they completely got away with it. It was amazing. They were taking Sammy Hagar, putting him in for David Lee Roth. They went on a Dave bashing campaign. Sammy was repeatedly bashing Dave. It's almost like they had a game plan to go out on an anti-Dave campaign. You go to their shows, and I was at them, they'd have signs David Lee Who and all that kinds of stuff. They would bring them on stage. They would burn pictures of Dave. It was insane. And you'd think out of all of them, Dave would be doing stuff like that because he had a more aggressive personality. But it's interesting because Dave wasn't going that route. And Van Halen really went out of their way. I mean, they went right on MTV during the Unleashed special and was describing Dave as being a toothache in the band. And now Sammy is a crown with a gold cap on it. It was really like to the point of insanity. And it was unbelievable considering that they were working for Warner Brothers, who was also representing Dave. And then it got to the point, page 179 in your book, where Ed apologizes in the press to Dave. Do you think that he had pushed things too far and Warner Brothers was pressuring him to be like, hey, listen, back off and, you're obviously causing problems here?
I don't imagine that Eddie would have paid an awful lot of attention to what Warner Brothers wanted from, but it might have been that sort of getting a sense from fans that's really like, can't you guys just like get over this? Like, can't you both be a bit cooler about this? And it starts to look just a bit petty and a bit sort of insecure. Yeah, just a bit sort of beneath you. It's, it's like, why? Like, who cares? Like, like, I mean, it's not in terms where like somebody get dumped by their girlfriends, and they come out and they've got an amazingly hot new girlfriend that everybody loves, but they're still, you're still bitching about your ex, and it's like, you know what, like maybe you should be a bit more gracious and grateful for what you have. Like, fair enough. Like, you got bitten, you got burned, and like nobody wants to be dumped, and that's that's embarrassing, whatever. But move on and look what you've got now. Like, what? Just let it go. This is not in anybody's interest at this point. I mean, I find it hard to believe that it would have been a dictate from on high, or just a sort of the groundswell of like people going, it's starting to make you look bad. The fact that you care about this, because be the bigger man here and, literally just move on.
Right.
The people have chosen, and they've chosen you. Just let it go. Like, you do not need to do this anymore.
Do you think that if Eat 'Em and Smile came out first, that would have changed the game? Do you think it would have been different?
I still remember, like, hearing Yankee Rose for the first time and just, hearing that sort of Steve Vai guitar work, and you're like, oh my God, this is incredible. This did seem like in sort of another level. And there were some great songs on that record. But at the same time, it didn't, from what I remember at the time, it was like, well, this is cool and all, but it's sort of like sub Van Halen. Like, best of it is like album tracks of Van Halen, but there's nothing really new. There's nothing sort of reinvented the wheel, because Van Halen had done so much, as you said, they'd covered so many bases that it was going to be hard to sort of totally transcend and go past what they had done before. So it seemed like a really solid album, a great album, and Vai, seemed like a huge talent, but it didn't seem like it was knocking Van Halen off their perch in any way to me. Like, it's hard to say what anybody else was thinking at the time. Obviously, there was an excitement around it, but I feel like secretly you could enjoy both. What was to stop you? When your friends sort of had arguments around the table about who was better, you could choose one side or the other. You had both records in your record collection, so.
But it's almost like the band Van Halen was almost asking people to make a choice. You know what I mean? Like, I'll give you an example. I was a fan of both. I bought both albums. I saw both tours. I didn't understand why there was a need to side with one. But for some reason, when you went to the Van Halen show, it was all about bashing Dave, choose us. Dave didn't say a word about Van Halen. But I'll tell you what I did get at Dave's show is I got Van Halen songs. Dave played an entire catalog of old Van Halen songs. Van Halen came in there and they hardly played any old Van Halen songs. They played two. Ain't Talk About Love in Panama. How do you think Sammy got away with taking the lead singer job of Van Halen and refusing to sing Van Halen songs?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, Sammy has always been very good at, much like Gene Simmons, Sammy's always been very good at promoting Sammy. As much as he's an incredibly confident man who, never really seems to have his confidence dented by anything, I guess there was very much a realization that there was a lot of affection for, I mean, of course there's going to be a lot of affection. You're replacing sort of America's sweetheart in a way at the sort of front of this band. Sammy's a clever guy and he's a persuasive guy, and you can imagine him sitting down with, I don't want to be sort of mean here about anybody else, but you can imagine Sammy sitting down with the guys going, guys, we don't need this. This is a new chapter. Look at what we're doing now. Look at how everyone's behind us. We don't need to give that guy the credit. Like, that's history. We're moving on. Let's not be sort of weighed down by what we've done. We've got that. That's in the bag.
And somehow he convinced them to do Sammy Hagar songs in the set. I mean, that was crazy. I was going to the show and I'm seeing him play his songs, his solo songs. So it's almost like Ed Loeffler, their manager, said, all right, we'll do 2 Sammy songs and we'll do 2 Van Halen songs. But the difference is he joined Van Halen. Van Halen didn't join Sammy Hagar. It's a different situation.
Yes. I wonder if that was sort of part of the contractual agreement was sort of struck between the two labels. It was like, you're pulling one of our star artists away for an indeterminate amount of time. We're going to make you pay for that. We're going to want points on it. But also, we don't want those records dying. Even if it is only 2 songs per night, we want that reminder that this is Sammy Hagar, the artist. This guy's a big deal too, and people should be also checking him out. So, I wonder if that was literally written into the contracts of like, we don't want Sammy's past erased either. That's sort of our legacy and our fallback, for this artist. So if you want to scrub out David Lee Roth's history, that's up to you guys. But we're not going to scrub Sammy's history need, because that might be what we need to sell the Sammy Hagar tour again on.
Yeah, and what's also interesting is Sammy noted in your book, page 169, he's always bashing Dave, and he's very often accusing him of being gay. What do you think that is? Like, what is his obsession with that?
It was sort of like this ultimate insult. I mean, it seems weird. I mean, it's still used now, obviously. A couple of places in the book where Sammy uses the F word to describe Dave, and I guess it's, something about sort of that ultra masculinity, sort of blue collar rocker that Sammy represents, and that's sort of his constituency. That if he sort of planted the seeds in people's mind that was how Dave was. I mean, it's a very school playground kind of way, and you would think that people would be, grown men to be levelling that insult at one another.